The first thing people noticed was the way the man stood, quietly, almost invisibly, between the woman and the danger, as if his body had learned long ago how to become a wall without making a sound. The street was busy, a narrow stretch of sidewalk outside a small neighborhood clinic, where veterans sometimes came for checkups that didn't feel like hospitals. Cars rolled by, phones buzzed, a city breathing through another ordinary afternoon. No one expected anything extraordinary to happen there. Least of all, the woman holding the leash of a trembling dog, or the man who stepped forward before anyone realized there was something to fear. The woman was a veteran, though you wouldn't know it by looking at her. Her jacket was worn at the elbows, her boots scuffed, her hair pulled back in a simple tie that spoke more of habit than style. She carried herself with a careful strength, the kind built not for attention, but for survival. Beside her was a medium-sized mixed-breed dog with soft eyes and a nervous tail, a service dog trained to ground her when memories surged without warning. The dog leaned into her leg, sensing the change in the air before humans did. The shouting came suddenly, sharp and entitled, cutting through the hum of traffic. A black car had stopped too close to the curb, blocking the clinic's entrance ramp. When the veteran asked, politely, quietly, if the driver could move so she could pass, the response was laughter. Then a door slammed. Then a young man stepped out, expensive jacket, watch flashing in the sunlight, eyes filled with the kind of confidence that comes from never having faced real consequences. He was known in the neighborhood, not by name, but by reputation. People whispered who his father was, what doors opened for him, what problems disappeared. He walked as if the sidewalk belonged to him, as if the world had been arranged for his comfort alone. When he saw the woman and her dog, something ugly flickered across his face. Annoyance at being inconvenienced, irritation at being asked to consider someone else. Move, he snapped, though it was his car that blocked her path. She tried to explain. Her voice was calm, but her hands tightened slightly on the leash. The dog pressed closer, sensing the tension rising like an unseen tide. A few people slowed, watching from a distance, curiosity battling caution. No one stepped in. Not yet. That was when the man appeared, as if he had been there all along. He was unremarkable at first glance. Jeans, plain jacket, posture relaxed but alert. He didn't raise his voice or puff out his chest. He simply positioned himself between the woman and the young man, one hand open, palm outward, a universal gesture of pause. Hey, he said quietly, there's no need for this. The young man laughed again, louder this time. Who are you supposed to be? The man didn't answer right away. He glanced back at the woman, his eyes meeting hers for a brief second. In that look was reassurance, steady and unspoken, as if to say, I've got this. She felt something loosen in her chest, a tiny release of tension she hadn't realized she was holding. I'm just someone asking you to take a step back, the man said. The insult that followed was crude, unnecessary, delivered with the ease of someone used to winning arguments by intimidation. The young man reached into his jacket, the movement sharp and deliberate. Time slowed in that strange way it does when danger announces itself. The gun came out smoothly, practiced, glinting in the sunlight. Gasps rippled through the small crowd that had formed. Someone swore under their breath. The dog whimpered, ears flattening, body tense. The veteran froze, her breath catching as old memories clawed their way toward the surface. Checkpoints, shouting, the metallic smell of fear. The man in front of her didn't flinch. He shifted his stance just slightly, grounding himself, feet planted as if the concrete beneath him were familiar territory. His voice remained calm, almost gentle. "You don't want to do this," he said. The gun wavered, aimed now at his chest. The young man's face flushed, anger and excitement, mixing into something volatile. "You think I'm afraid of you?" "No," the man replied. "I think you're afraid of something else." That answer seemed to confuse him, just enough to crack the moment open. In that fragile space, the man spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a sincerity that cut through the noise. "She's just trying to get to her appointment," he said, nodding slightly toward the woman, without turning his back. "She served her country. That dog helps her sleep at night. You don't need to prove anything here." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The city seemed to hold its breath. The young man's grip tightened on the gun. His knuckles whitened. He looked around, suddenly aware of the eyes on him, the phones raised, the weight of witnesses. Pride warred with fear. The kind of fear that comes not from danger, but from being seen. "You don't know who I am," he said, voice trembling despite his attempt at menace. The man nodded slowly. "You're right, I don't, but I know who you can choose to be next." Something shifted then, not all at once, but enough. The gun lowered a fraction, just an inch, but it felt like a mile. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had finally called for help. The young man swore, anger collapsing into panic. He shoved the gun back into his jacket and back toward his car, throwing one last look filled with hate and humiliation. "This isn't over," he muttered, before slamming the door and speeding away. The street exhaled. People spoke all at once, voices overlapping, adrenaline spilling into sound. The veteran sank onto a nearby bench, legs unsteady. The dog leaned into her, licking her hand until her breathing slowed. The man turned then, crouching slightly to be at her level. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, though tears had begun to gather, uninvited. "I think so," she said. "Thank you." He smiled softly, the kind of smile that carried no expectation of praise. "You don't owe me anything." The police arrived soon after, questions asked, statements taken. The man answered simply, offering no embellishment. When an officer asked for his occupation, he hesitated, then shrugged. "I'm retired," he said. It wasn't until later, after the crowd dispersed, after the veteran insisted on buying him a coffee from the corner shop, that the truth emerged. They sat at a small outdoor table, the dog curled at her feet, the city returning to its usual rhythm around them. "You didn't look scared," she said quietly. "Not even when he pulled the gun." He took a sip of coffee, considering. "I was," he admitted, "but fear doesn't always mean running." She studied him, noticing the faint scars on his hands, the way his eyes scanned their surroundings without conscious effort. "You've done this before," she said. It wasn't a question. He nodded. "Navy SEAL," he said simply. "Long time ago." The words landed gently, but heavily. She felt a wave of understanding wash over her. Not awe, not hero worship, but recognition. The same recognition she felt when she met others who had carried impossible burdens and learned how to set them down without breaking. "You saved me," she said. He shook his head. "No, I just stood where someone needed me to stand." She smiled then, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "That's saving," she replied. They talked for a while longer, about ordinary things, dogs, weather, the strange comfort of routine. When they finally parted, it was without ceremony. He walked away down the street, blending back into the world as quietly as he had entered it. The veteran watched him go, feeling something warm and unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope, maybe, or faith restored in small, steady measures. Later that night, as she lay in bed, with her dog curled against her, she thought about the moment when everything could have gone wrong, and didn't. She thought about how strength didn't always shout, how courage sometimes looked like kindness standing its ground. Somewhere across the city, the man sat alone on his balcony, listening to the distant hum of life continuing. He thought about the choices people made in moments of pressure, how thin the line was between harm and humanity. He knew he would never see that woman again. And that was enough. Because the truth was, the world didn't change that day in any grand visible way. No headlines were written, no medals were awarded. But two people went to sleep knowing that when faced with fear, compassion had answered first. And that, in its quiet way, changed everything.